Villagers for Trump Club. Thank you for being with us tonight. I'd like to personally take this moment and thank our IT director, Mr. Justin, for his dedication in making sure we're prepared for our online rallies and meetings. We really do appreciate his dedication. Also, I'd like to take a moment and talk about our faith committee. Thanks to Janet Brown, Dr. Bob Dreyfus, and Fred Cohen, who has trained 50 ambassadors to help people in their churches register to vote in the upcoming election. Big heads off to Fred, who has trained all 50 himself. Also, I'd like to say is that Matt Staver of Liberty Counsel, one of our favorite speakers, who believes Dr. Fauci, Bill Gates, and others are using this planned pandemic to control our lives. He will be our guest speaker Wednesday night at an online meeting at ffctv.org. Again, ffctv.org. We will have Pastor Whittingham and Matt and his organizations is in the midst of many lawsuits to defend personal and Christian freedoms that are under major attack. We ask that you join us. If you're not getting our emails from our club, please be sure to visit Villagers for Trump, our website. The information for in our contact list, we want to make sure that you're able to contact us and get our communications. So go on our website to register for our events at www.villagersfortrump.org. And again, thank you for being with us again tonight. Please be safe. Many blessings to each of you. And now I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Jim Volpe. He will be doing our prayer for us this evening. Welcome, Jim. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. My name is Jim Volpe. I am one of the original members of the Villagers for Trump Club. I want to start off this prayer with two things. First, with Proverbs 11:21. The Lord said, "Be sure of this, the wicked will not go unpunished, but those who are righteous will go free." Then in Jeremiah 1:12, he said, "The Lord said to me, you have seen correctly, for I am watching to see that my word is fulfilled." Heavenly Father, we trust in your word, and we know you will perform it and live up to it. So watch over all those who are going through some difficult times. I can't imagine how bad they are. That you will make sure the righteous prevail and those wicked behind the virus, behind all this attack on our president, will come to be known and punished for it. Next thing, I am working on getting the evangelical vote out. I'm working with David G on this, and I am working on getting the evangelical vote out in 3 counties, Marion, Sumter, and Lake. And if we get that evangelical vote out, there'll be no problem for our president getting back in. Thank you very much, and let's proceed with the meeting.
Well, let me just go ahead and start. Everyone out there, are you ready for a change from where you've been and what you've been doing or not doing, as the case may be? Well, by our example for younger generations, it's time to emerge as best we can with attitude to respond and act. So let's get going with our club's mission, and that's to support and re-elect President Trump and every strong conservative candidate or office holder with the same conservative values. So we've got a few announcements to get this going, and we hope you'll be happy, very happy to hear about them. This Friday, we're having all of those of you who are eager to get out and campaign to gather in front of Perkins Restaurant on Route 441 for a sign and flag waving from 9 to 10 a.m. Now, more details on this will be in an e-blast in your inbox tomorrow morning. We will be social distancing and wearing masks. So look for those details tomorrow morning. We're also planning our next golf cart rallies. No dates yet, but starting in a few weeks, we'll likely be focused on each of our 4 areas of the villages, the 3 squares and some major arteries around each one, and then one in the New Fenny area. So these will be smaller. They'll be more manageable. We'll be able to easily social distance, of course, and we probably won't have to wear our masks inside our golf carts. So it takes a little more planning by the action and mobilization team leadership, but it will also take an sign up that you'll receive instructions for to sign up for these rallies. Now, I'm going to put on my pillow guy hat, figuratively speaking. After the next few minutes, you'll know what I mean. While the shelter-in-place mandate has lifted partially in phase 2 of reopening our economy to begin getting America back to 2.0, or getting there, period, reinventing ourselves. Especially for seniors, we're still wearing protective masks and social distancing, so we hope you will continue to obtain your Trump gear with us to support Villagers for Trump and conservative candidates, and especially our president. Wear it proudly when you are in public as you silently campaign to re-elect our president. That is, until you find words that are appropriate to add also. So tomorrow morning, please check out the details in an email you'll receive from us about a special in-person shopping opportunity at Lake Sumter Landing. Please come wearing your protective mask. It will take place on this coming Thursday from 12 noon to 3 o'clock. You may choose to bring your bag lunch and join us having our lunch at the picnic tables. We will be located by the radio broadcasting station and Haagen-Dazs ice cream. Or just come by and see us modeling the new arrivals of apparel, along with showing you the most popular items of Trump gear. Remember, all our apparel items are of high quality and made in the USA. Lastly, I'd like to show you a close-up of the hottest item at our last rally. That's the LED scrolling Trump campaign pin. You will see it on your screen, but it's backwards, of course. But mine says Trump 2020. There are several different images it repeats, or it can be switched to just one message. The messages are Trump 2020, I love, with a heart, I love Trump, keep America great, and God bless America. This totally eye-catching pin comes with both a pin attached and a magnet on the back to easily attach to your clothing or the outside of a clutch bag, or perhaps just a hard, thin surface, such as the front of a folder. These pins are reprogrammable for the future, too. You may change it to ask me about my new grandbaby, or cancer-free 5 years and counting, whatever you want to advertise to the rest of the world. But after President Trump is re-elected, and they do come with their own rechargeable cord. It's a real bargain at just $20 for this box set. Now here is the special to seal your deal. For a limited time only, one golf cart or car sign will be free with each purchase. 2 signs will be free with 2 or more items purchased while they last. You may also order from home, and the information to do that will also be in the e-blast tomorrow morning, along with the announcement of our sign and flag waving this Friday morning. So be sure to check your inbox tomorrow. Trump gear will not be available for purchase online, although you may see the items on our villagersfortrump.org website for easy reference, or in the email tomorrow morning. They're all there. And the free signs special will be available with phone orders from home too. So please watch for our next e-blast. You know, these Trump gear items are neat gifts for friends and family too. Thanks for your attention. And now Jan Morrill, our legislative director, will give you a legislative update and introduce our main speaker of the evening.
Thank you, Suzanne. You are fantastic. I want one of those pins, definitely. Those are awesome. I think I could sell them in Georgia. All right, let me go to sharing my screen. No, I want, let's see. I want this. Okay, I don't know. I guess I can get out of this. Can you see my screen?
Nope, we can just see you.
You just see me. You don't see the screen. Oh my gosh. I'm trying. Okay. Clicking on share my screen and it doesn't have, oh, here it is. There it is. Sorry, just my mistake. Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on legislatively. You know, they're always trying to do something, even though they're not in session. But once again, I go back to that the condition upon which God has given man liberty is eternal vigilance. And I think that's critical. Can you see my screen right now?
Yes, we can.
All right. Okay. So the focus for Congress, AKA Pelosi, right now is she's refusing to convene and she's using the excuse of social distancing. And there's a couple different reasons for that. Pelosi has a wish list that she wants a national vote by mail, and we know what that will do. She has mandated diversity on corporate boards and in banks, expanding tax credits for wind and solar power, and stricter carbon emission restrictions for airlines. So that could be devastating. And they plan to pass a fourth bailout bill to be approximately $2 trillion. So I don't know where that money is going to come from. But some good news is we do have a senator from New Jersey. He's a state senator, Joe Panacchio. And last month, he was taking a very strong stance on getting hydroxychloroquine, abbreviated HCQ, available for people on a preventative basis. So we see more of that happening. And then just to give you some insight into the drug, and people might say that hydroxychloroquine is limited in supply, and that's a big fat lie. So Novartis committed to donate 130 million doses. Bayer donated 3 million. Amneal donated 400,000 doses for LA patients. And Teva donated 6 million. And that's quite a bit, and it's still coming in. But what we do know for sure is that the FDA is trying to prevent that from being accessed to people in the community. And we also know for sure that if you wait till you're in the hospital, it might be too late. So there's a lot of things going on with that, and I'll get into that in a bit. Some other good news is we know that Trump's confirmed at least 200 judges, and we hope and pray once he gets reelected that we can see him confirm another judge to the Supreme Court. There was no impeachment, and we're pushing to bring manufacturing back to the US from China. Now, Marco Rubio has been very, very on fire, very instrumental in moving this along, but there is some pushback, believe it or not. Donald Trump was ready to sign an executive order to start this process, but there have been certain nefarious organizations that have obviously their own interest at heart trying to stop it, believe it or not. And those are certain manufacturers, in addition to the pharmacy benefit managers and group purchasing organizations and more. So we need to call Marco Rubio, call him at his local office number and tell him thank you, and that you need to call the White House and say, what's going on with this executive order? We need to stop importing from China. How can we trust them? So they are also talking about getting needed medical supplies, and this is a big deal. I was just on a call this evening with the Heritage Sentinel people, and Ross Spano from Florida 15, he's a congressman. He has a bill that he's introducing, and it's really focused helping, to bring America back away from China. So we have a number of congressmen, senators. I know Senator Marsha Blackburn, she has also been attempting that. Okay, let's look at what Trump was doing. The Buy American, which is, really pushed by Senator Rubio. He put into motion the Defense Production Act. They had an order on preventing hoarding of medical supplies. If that was found, then there was going to be serious fines. And of course, back, we talked about Homeland Security rule and how important that is, so that if somebody comes to this country and it shows that they're an economic hardship, then we do not have to let them in. So that actually got pushed forward. Okay, you've all heard about the CARES Act. That's the third bill in the trio already. And there were about, there's another that was actually, forget the 40 billion, it was total of over 6 trillion. So what we discovered though is that there were some things going on that maybe the average person doesn't know. For instance, if there could be advanced refundable tax credits for paid FMLA, they would delay paying payroll taxes, payroll protection loan up to 2.5 months of payroll costs. And all these things sound very good. And people have applied. Well, they're out of money now. So it's been a bit of an issue, especially for certain small businesses. The larger businesses, as you've heard, have been able to get money, and it doesn't make sense, but they're coming up with a fourth bill too. One bill that I want you to pay attention to, and this is, I'm not making this up, go to congress.gov. It's HR 6666. It's called the TRACE Act, because they're going to test, they're going to reach, they're going to contact everyone. It was introduced on May 1st, which wasn't too long ago, by Congressman Bobby Rush from Illinois. And Bobby Rush is a Black Panther. He was a Black Panther. So he's not, the type of individual that you would see supporting the conservative values and Constitution that we do. Currently, right now, there are 45 co-sponsors in Congress. All 45 are Democrats. And it's in the House and Energy and Commerce Committee. How this will work is through HHS will authorize the CDC to give grants to various entities that will go to homes or places, other places, and test everyone. And they're looking at about $100 billion for this year, and subsequent years it could be more. So this is an ongoing act. And I can tell you for a fact, in Georgia and California, they are sending people door to door to do some of this testing. This is a big concern. This is a big overreach on your personal privacy, and the information is not going to be for what you think it would be used for. Okay, this should be, oh, wait a minute, let me go forward here. Let's talk about what's motivating the deep state regarding all the things that we're seeing. We know that there's a big pushback, as Diana Hammond talked about. Matt Staver is going to talk about what's going on with our medical deep state, which is Fauci and Hahn from the FDA, Redfield from the CDC, and Deborah Birx, and there's some more. Well, one of the reasons they're pushing so hard on locking us down and taking away some constitutional rights is that there's too many people waking up to the deep state. So oftentimes when that happens, people like to move quickly on that. And Trump has opposed much of the deep state agenda, so they needed to stop him. They needed to crash the economy and to try to mess up our election. And of course, the deep state, they want a worldwide movement against, there's a worldwide movement against globalism right now. There were riots, remember, in Hong Kong. And what you don't know, are the people in Wuhan, China, where the virus came from. They were rioting. They were protesting because of the poor air quality, poor water quality, among other things. So that kind of shut them down, because in China, we didn't see much going on in Beijing or into Shanghai. In fact, there were 5 deaths, I think, in Beijing and 8 deaths in Shanghai. So it was really interesting to see how it was primarily in the Wuhan area. So they don't want a quick recovery. So that's why they keep saying things like, we have to just keep things locked down a little bit longer. And they are really willing to destroy everything that you call good: your family, your church, your prosperity, your freedom. One thing for sure that they're pushing is forced vaccination. And that tracking will come with that uh, uh, bill, HB 6666. They intend to do certificates for travel and do business, and pretty much your behavior will be controlled by the NIH, CDC, and FDA, just like it is right now. I don't know if you're aware, but we are experiencing what it would be like living in a socialized communistic country, in addition to having socialized medicine. Because typically we're used to going to the doctor, and the doctor and the individual decide what is the best action. Now it is being dictated by the FDA, CDC, and NIH, and especially when it comes to access to a very inexpensive, safe drug called hydroxychloroquine. Currently, right now, they're attempting to destroy any congressman or state legislator that speaks out. And one thing I don't know if you've noticed is that certain governors, certain mayors, certain areas across the country are actually encouraging people to turn their neighbors in for various reasons. And that's what they did in communist countries. So I want you to think, long and hard about that. And of course, they want to institute a process that will allow easy election fraud. As you know, mail-in ballots. Okay, so what can you do? Well, we know we need to be talking to our state representatives, our congressmen, our US senators, and perhaps even our mayors. But finding out who your sheriff is very important, and to determine his or her support of your constitutional rights, because the sheriff really has a lot of authority. And I know that KrisAnne will probably touch on that. So our state reps are Brett Haig, and he is our state representative, and Dennis Baxley, our state senator. Our congressman, typically, for depending upon where you're living, I think it's still going to be Dan Webster. And our US senators are Marco Rubio and Rick Scott. So I'm going to put this PowerPoint up on our website so you can access this, you can take a look at it. But I want you to look at what committees our senators are on. Marco Rubio is on the business and entrepreneurship, okay, intelligence. Okay, that's why he's very interested in what is going on with China. How is China preventing us from actually having the medications we need, products that we need? We can't trust them, that's very clear. So that's why Marco Rubio is very hot on pulling things away from China. And Senator Scott, he's Homeland Security and Armed Services. So both of those senators are very critical for us to contact. I just want to briefly touch on some of the things that were done back in January. And since we haven't been able to get people together, but we did have a very robust meetings in January when Rosemary Gibson, author of China RX, was in town. We met with J.R. Sanchez from Marco Rubio's office, and it was a fantastic meeting, and he helped make that happen for her with Marco Rubio. She was able to do she gave testimony to one of his committees, and that was very instrumental in what he was doing with Donald Trump. We met with Barry Cotton from Senator Rick Scott's office. Scott, unfortunately, and she met with people in Washington also from his office, and they were not as inclined to push the ball forward. So that's why I say, please call Rubio's office, tell him thank you. We also met with Krista Pearson from Congressman Dan Webster's office. Unfortunately, she has not gotten back to us. We have done at least 4 phone calls, messages, and sent 2 emails. So I was a little disappointed in that. And we were doing quite a bit in the month of December. So I would also recommend that you want to look at a couple other organizations that you could connect with for further grassroots action. And Gone Too Far, Salt and Light Council, that's for many of the things going on in the churches. Florida Family Policy Council is fantastic in Florida, and your pro-life organizations. And please go to congress.gov and you can track legislation. So you can see there is no lack of organizations that you can connect with. And as Diana said, Matt Staver from Liberty Counsel is going to be, you're going to be able to hear him on Wednesday night. And I will bring special attention to First Liberty Institute also. Kelly Shackelford has been successful recently in winning some lawsuits for pastors in some various states. So with that, I just want to say thank you, and I will post that to our website. So I'm back here. No, I want to do the video again. Okay, I can't see anything else. I think I stopped sharing, didn't I? I'm on. Okay, great. All right. Okay, so I'd like to introduce KrisAnne Hall. We are absolutely thrilled to have her speak to us. She truly is an expert at what she's been doing. She has lots of experience, and she will give us a critical analysis of how things are shaking out according to our Constitution in terms of what the federal government's doing, what our state and what our local governments seem to be doing, and what can we do about that. KrisAnne has an incredible background. She even served as in military intelligence as a cryptologic linguist with the U.S. Army. That's very impressive. And she was a prosecutor for the state of Florida for nearly a decade. She also traveled across the country for a national First Amendment law firm, helping Americans whose rights were violated by unlawful arrests and prosecution. Lots of great experience there. Well, I guess she'd had too much time on her hand doing all that, and she decided to write 6 books on American history and the U.S. And currently, she also is a professor at the River University School of Government. And attending hearings in Tallahassee, I have run into the people from the River School of Government. They are very active in going to Tallahassee and helping to push legislation that we care about along. In addition to all of these activities that KrisAnne does, she is still a regular consultant on various radio and podcasts, television programs, Law and Crime, Newsmax, Fox News, and she was even interviewed by C-SPAN and In Depth. And her books and classes are also featured on C-SPAN Book TV. And I know she does a lot of Twitter and other information, so you can find her there. So please look her up. So I would like to introduce KrisAnne Hall. And KrisAnne, I just want to thank you again. I mean, somebody of your caliber, we're just honored to have you. And I would like to get your take on how are we doing in the area of our constitutional rights and what the federal government has done in terms of this lockdown. And if you could talk about, it varies from state to state. I do know for a fact as a clinician, there's no scientific basis to wearing masks and the 6-foot rule. So KrisAnne, please tell us your analysis.
Well, I think that the first thing that we must really understand is that there is a distinction between what the federal government is doing and what the state is doing. President Trump has been very hands off with mandates and that kind of thing. He has left it to the states and to the local governments. I think the most disappointing thing coming out of the federal government today is all of the propaganda that's coming through the CDC and the NIH and Dr. Fauci and the Gates lobbyists and stuff like that, regarding what we now are seeing, not just simply from those that they slough off as being conspiracies, but from doctors with great knowledge, great experience, strong reputation, saying, you know, this virus that they've been talking about is simply not the pandemic and the dangerous pandemic that they have taught us and tried to convince us that it is. Now, I'm not doubting in any way, shape, or form that there is a COVID-19 flu, and I'm not doubting that people have gotten sick and people have died, but we've also seen as well that the numbers of the people died from COVID are being inflated. There was a representative from the Department of Health. I have a podcast and a radio show that I do Monday through Friday, live at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and all kinds of different platforms. And what we have to understand is that they're not telling us the truth about these death numbers. And I played a video from the governor of Illinois, had a press conference, and the director of the Illinois Department of Health actually stood up and said that everybody who dies and tests positive for COVID is actually marked as a COVID-related death. She said, even if the death was completely unrelated from COVID, maybe there was an underlying health condition. She even gave the example, if someone is on hospice with just simply a few days left to live and they have tested positive for COVID, then it's going to be recorded as a COVID-related death. And so the worst thing that's happening at the federal level is the misinformation and the spreading of irrational fear among the American people about what this is. Now, if you're at risk population, underlying health conditions, then as every flu, you should take that seriously. You should take your own personal precautions. But the fear that has driven our state and local governments into the point of denying, infringing, and then destroying the rights of the people is completely irrational and unreasonable. And so the infringements that we actually are feeling, experiencing, seeing are coming from the state and local levels and not from the federal government. And that's, I think that's a good thing. Everything that President Trump has done has been a recommendation. It's not been a mandate. The problem that we see is that politics now gets pulled into this, and people, governors want to not follow the recommendations or do anything, listen to anything that comes out of the Trump administration because it's Donald Trump, or that they want to do everything that comes out of the Trump administration, regardless of how they apply it, meaning they want to mandate on the citizens what are actually recommendations just because it's Donald Trump, has really caused great problems with with the infringement upon our rights. And so here in Florida, I can tell you that I can't even 6 months ago, I would have never even believed if somebody had told me that in 6 months, a sheriff in Hillsborough County, Florida, would be arresting a pastor for having church in the state of Florida. I would have never believed that a possibility in the state of Florida, much less anywhere in these United States. Maybe would have bought it in California or someplace in New York or something like that, but not in Florida. But it happened here in Florida. And so that's just an illustration. We had a woman arrested for jogging by herself on a trail for violation of social distancing. I don't know how you can violate social distancing when you're jogging by yourself, but it's these infringements upon our rights that we're seeing at the state and local level, which is even was really, really unfortunate, because at the state and local level, these things should never be happening. Samuel Adams remarked that people will tamely surrender. No people will tamely surrender their liberties, nor be easily subdued when knowledge is diffused and virtue is preserved. He said, on the contrary, when the people become universally ignorant and debauched in their manners, they will sink underneath their own weight without the aid of foreign invaders. And that's what's happening in America. We don't have a COVID crisis in America. What we have is a knowledge and virtue leading to a constitutional crisis. And I want us to realize that government doesn't have the authority to do what they're doing, and that at best, what the government ought to be doing is recommending that people take actions, and then the people have the ability to act responsibly on their own. It's not the role of government to mandate businesses be closed or businesses be open. I mean, that is what we call in constitutional law something that is arbitrary and capricious. When you will allow Walmart to be open, but the mom and pop store has to close, there's no rhyme, no reason to that. There are more people going to be shoved in Walmart than in the mom and pop store, and the mom and pop store may be selling the same things. Now, the idea that the government can determine what is an essential business and what is not an essential business ought to be offensive to every American with this American spirit within us. Our constitutional republic was created to keep government from doing these things, not to give permissions for them. And so what I want to do is I'm going to share with you some things from our Florida Constitution to help us see that what we're seeing at the state and local level is completely and totally unconstitutional. So let me share with you in the beginning here. Oh wait, let me stop this 1 second. This is what I'm going to do. There. All right, so what you're seeing now, I'll scroll up to the top here, is a copy of the Florida Constitution. And what I want us to go to here is the legislative section, Article 3. And Article 3, Section 1 says that the legislative power of the state shall be vested in a legislature of the state of Florida, consisting of a Senate composed of one senator elected from each senatorial district and a House of Representatives composed of one member elected from each representative district. Now, this is pretty standard stuff across the United States and is mirrored also in Article 1 of our federal Constitution. Lawmaking is reserved to the legislative branch. One of the fundamental principles of government in America, in our constitutional republic, is separation of powers. And separation of powers means that you have different branches of government with different separate delegations of authority. And the separation of powers dictates that these powers cannot be shared and they cannot be stolen. So when we say the legislative branch has the sole authority to create law, what that means is that the executive branch, meaning the governor, and the judicial branch, meaning the court system, does not have the authority to create law. That lawmaking body is reserved to the legislative. The lawmaking authority is reserved to the legislative branch. If you have the governor creating law, then you have a violation of separation powers. And James Madison, who was the fourth president of our United States, also remarked as being the father of the Constitution, quoting political philosophers of centuries, said that when the legislative and executive authorities are shared or concentrated into one person or one body, he said very seriously that liberty cannot survive. So separation of powers is essential to the preservation of the rights of the people, because when you have the same people who are making the laws, enforcing the laws, then what you have is a totalitarian regime. And when the legislative branch assumes the authority of the executive branch, that's what you get, legislative and executive. When the executive branch, meaning the governor, takes on the authority to write laws, then what you no longer have is a constitutional republic, but what you have is a monarchy, where the governor is now with the authority to write laws and enforce those laws. Now, 244 years ago, our founders overthrew a British government to keep the American people from ever having to suffer from an executive that can write laws and enforce laws at the same time. So what we have now with these COVID executive orders is the most severe violation of separation of powers, with a governor issuing orders with the force of law. Meaning if you don't obey the orders, you're thrown into jail, you're arrested, you're fined, you're imprisoned. We also have that trickling down to the local levels, and our local governments are supposed to be designed in the same way. We have a board of county commissioners. We have a city council. They have limited delegated authority on creating ordinances. And what we now have, instead of county commissioners, which are representatives of the people creating ordinances, what we have are separate bodies that do not represent fully the people. We call them emergency planning groups that have a pulling of this representative and a pulling of that representative and a pulling. So you have 5 or 6 people pulled from the local county, city governments, so that not everybody in the county has an elected representative on the emergency planning group. So you have inadequate representation. And you have these people who are acting outside the legislative authority granted to the county boards and the city councils, creating orders that operate as if they were legislative bodies. Orders rather, where people are being arrested, people are being thrown into jail. This is a violent violation of separation of powers and ought to be seen to be unconstitutional, completely unconstitutional. And so what I want us to see as well is that we also have violations of our basic rights. And the violation of our basic rights we can see in this section. Our basic rights section is found in Article 1. So number 1, Section 1 in Article 1, we see all political power is inherent in the people, and the enunciation herein of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or impair others retained by the people. Now, this is actually Section 1 is an adoption of the Article 1, Section 1 of the U.S. Constitution and also the 9th Amendment in the Bill of Rights. So what they're saying here is, once again, all power rests with the people, which means only the legislative branch can create law, and the people have the authority to govern their government. We are not a monarchical rule. The governor does not rule over us. The people are designed to rule over their governors. And so it also in the 9th Amendment declares that, yes, we made a list of rights, but this list of rights is not exhaustive. It is a list of rights that should get us started. And that just because we made a list doesn't mean that you can deny us these rights on the list, disparage those rights on the list, and because we made a list, you can't deny us others that are not on the list. Now, I want us to look here at Section 3, religious freedom. There shall be no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting or penalizing the free exercise thereof. Now, that is also an adoption of the First Amendment in the Bill of Rights, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And what we are seeing in these local county orders dictating to churches how they can and cannot have their services as a direct violation of our free exercise of religion. Now, let me mention to you, I am not opposed to churches who choose to limit their services, churches who choose to put their services online. But it is not the role of government, nor is it within the authority of government to mandate how a church can hold its service. There is no precedent that even substantiates anything that might be remotely close to justifying this as a government restriction on churches. And what's interesting is, and what I find most hypocritical about these orders, is simply that we have the governor or our county EPG boards determining that certain businesses are deemed essential and that they don't have to follow, because of the essential nature of who they are, they don't have to follow the CDC guidelines. So as you saw, many of us saw, even at the height of restrictions in our counties and the state, Walmart, Costco, Michael's Craft Store, literally packed out with people, the parking lot's full. And at the same time, we had, like I said, in Hillsborough County, a pastor arrested for having a service that was engaging in social distancing, had engaged in sanitary practices superior to any even effort of any of these essential businesses, as if the government deeming these businesses, quote unquote, essential, eliminates any opportunity for the virus to spread or to infect people. Not only that, what you have is arbitrary and capricious determinations of which businesses are essential and not, and the terms upon which they can be open. I want us to think about this logically. Just take Costco, for example, because the business is huge, and we saw the pictures, the place packed out. Well, Costco is open 7 days a week, 12 hours a day during, at any given time. And the people who come and go at Costco are generally complete strangers to each other. But a church, now Costco's deemed essential, so they can be open and people can come and go, and the social distancing may or may not apply. They're certainly not limited to a gathering of 10 people, regardless of the size of the building, because some magic fairy dust fell on them because some governmental agency called them essential. But a church that meets once a week for less than 2 hours a week, given any congregation, generally people who are not strangers to each other, people who have not just simply, weekly associations with each other, but quite often more than weekly associations with each other, in an environment that's easier to control than a Costco's, and in an environment where people can actually become and remain involved in separations and control distancing, was deemed non-essential by our counties, which ought to have raised alarms from us in the very beginning. Not just simply from a freedom of religion aspect, but from a logical, critical thinking aspect. Why is it that the mom and pop stores who sell the same things that Walmart does can't be open, when a smaller store will have fewer people and greater opportunity to conduct and control their own limited environment? See, in constitutional law, we call that arbitrary and capricious, which ought to be completely and totally unconstitutional, and has been held to be completely and totally unconstitutional. You also have Section 5 of the Florida Constitution that says the people shall have the right to peaceably assemble and to instruct their representatives and to petition for redress of grievances. The elimination of our ability to publicly assemble without permission and limiting the numbers of our public assembly is a direct conflict with Section 5 of the Florida Constitution, direct conflict with the First Amendment. I think sometimes what people the connection that people miss is that the right to peaceably assemble is directly and intimately related to the right to petition for a redress of grievances. The most powerful tool of petition is the public assembly, where people gather to protest, to make those in government ashamed of what they're doing. Now, what we've seen through history is that those in power don't want the people to protest. They don't want them to assemble because those in power don't want to be held accountable if they're engaged in behavior destructive to the people's rights that that encourages or increases their own power. And throughout history, even our own American history, during our revolution, we had governors limiting the ability of people to peacefully protest. And when the government can tell you that only 2 people can legally assemble in an open place, then what they're saying is, we can arrest you for complaining and protesting about our government. Now, what that means then is that the governments who create the oppressive and unconstitutional laws now also have the same authority, they say, to control the people's ability to protest those unconstitutional and oppressive laws, which is why we have Section 5 of the Florida Constitution and the First Amendment to prevent government from doing those things. Section 9 of the Florida Constitution. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. When the government can tell you this business can stay open, but this business must close, this is a direct violation of Section 9 of our Florida Constitution and and Amendment 5 and Amendment 7 of the U.S. Constitutions. You see, in order for the government to take property from the people, the people must have a right to challenge that taking through due process. Not only that, they have the right to just compensation for that taking. These shutting down, the shutting down of our businesses are a taking of our property. It's being done without any due process recourse, without any challenge whatsoever, and is a clear and distinct violation of Section 9 of our Constitution of Florida and Section 5, Article 5 and Article 7 of our U.S. Constitution. We also have Section 12, searches and seizures, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures, and against unreasonable interception of private communications by any means shall not be violated. No warrant shall issue but based upon probable cause, supported by affidavit, particularly describing the place to be searched or the persons or things to be seized. This is the taking of our businesses without a warrant, the compelling us to wear masks, the instruction under penalty of law for us to stay in our homes without due process is a clear violation of Section 12, which you would notice is actually also a violation of the Fourth Amendment in our U.S. Constitution. So we have distinct, and this is just the beginning of the list. We have distinct violations of our rights happening right in front of our faces. And what we're seeing coming from our county and local governments with this contact tracing is just an expansion and an extension of greater violations. Number one, healthy people cannot be quarantined. That is an unlawful seizure of our person without due process. Quarantine is designed for sick people. And to put people under house arrest that are healthy is unconstitutional, both at the state and federal levels, for in a violation of the people's rights. To quarantine someone requires due process, even if they are sick, to prevent the government from taking the rights of the people simply because people don't agree with them. Because if the government is the facilitator of the test, they are the judge of the test, and that test is only made public with the permission of the government, then what is the safety and the security of the people to keep the government from lying about the results of a test to simply condemn and confine someone who opposes the government? Now, I know in today's society that sounds kind of like a radical conspiracy theory narrative. But if you study history and you know how government works, it's no longer an impossibility. It becomes a likely happening when government gets out of control. And you cannot deny that it has happened over time with governments, and you cannot deny that it is a possibility to occur again. And because you cannot deny, and you must admit that any government who can step outside of their protection of the people's rights also has the authority to, through the force of government, to deprive people of rights, what exactly is the limit to the exercise of their power? We are a constitutional republic with written constitutions to ensure and to protect the people. As Richard Henry Lee said, one of our founders, he said, we are not to protect ourselves just from governments under what those in government will do, but also what they may do. We have a standard in the Constitution that the people are to be, those in power are to be held to. And it's that Constitution and the Constitution of the state of Florida that is supposed to bind and limit our governments. And these stay-at-home orders are completely and totally unconstitutional. They are a violation of our rights, and we're seeing this being reinforced through the courts across America. I wanted to show you something. I want to share something with you really quick. On my website, KrisAnneHall.com, I have an article. This is where we publish all of our episodes of our daily journal, where we take current events from a constitutional and principled perspective. We weed out the fake news and the mainstream narrative and the government revision. We just give you the hard facts about what's actually happening in the news. Here are some articles that I've written. Right here under the latest articles, I have an article called Shelter-in-Place Orders, the Thing of Kings. Now, what I give you right here in this article is in writing the constitutional analysis that I've talked to you about today. I want you to also understand that my husband and I, on our daily journal, talk about these things on a daily basis. We actually show you videos and show you the law and all these other things that we see happening, and we review the news from a constitutional perspective. I also have come to understand that there is a dearth of education on the Constitution available to the public. Our schools don't teach the Constitution, and I can tell you from study and from fact that American educational institutions stopped teaching the truth about the Constitution in 1833. In 1833, we set aside the handbook that our founders wrote on how the Constitution was supposed to work, and we picked up a brand new handbook written by a man named Joseph Story, who was a Supreme Court justice, who rewrote how our federal government is supposed to work and how our Constitution is to be applied. And we've been working on these errant ideologies since 1833. Our schools don't teach the Constitution. I graduated from the University of Florida. I have traveled all over the country and I've spoken to lawyers and judges at all levels, all across the country. Our law schools don't teach the Constitution anymore. My graduating class of 300, you'd be very hard pressed to find any more than a handful of students who graduated with me who actually read the entire Constitution and know what it says. Our law schools don't teach the Constitution. What they teach is constitutional law, which teaches that judges and lawyers know more about the Constitution than the people who actually wrote it and designed it to be applied. And so that's why we've created libertyfirstuniversity.com. And you can get that at libertyfirstuniversity.com, or you can get it by going to KrisAnne Hall and clicking on the Liberty First University tab. We have this online training. It's suitable for ages 6 to 96. We have amazing students. We have groups of law students who take these classes. I have judges who take these classes because they recognize that we are not getting this education anywhere else. And so these are the kind of resources that we have available to you. Now, I'm noticing in our chat room that we have a couple questions. I understand the question is your point about the control of the government over our behavior regarding COVID-19. However, I have a problem going to a place such as Walmart or Sam's, finding many young people without masks, which would protect others while I wear a mask, which protects them. I would like the store to request all customers to wear a mask. Question is, how should that be reinforced? Shouldn't we, the older seniors, have the right to be protected also? What suggestions would you have? Well, the suggestion is that you understand that masks don't protect you. That is part of the propaganda that is being errantly placed forward. These masks, and this is not just me talking to you. I'm talking from medical studies published by the National Institute of Health, by National Institute of Health doctors, that these masks don't keep you safe from a virus. A virus is a microscopically small material. Take your mask and look at it under a microscope. If you look at your mask under a microscope, the holes between the fibers of your mask will look like the Grand Canyon. So your mask does not shield you or anyone else from a virus. What it does is it creates a false sense of security that makes people act recklessly in maybe reckless disregard for the safety of others. We'd actually be safer if we didn't have masks on and we just realized we don't need to breathe in each other's faces and we need to operate with proper sanitation and hygiene practices when we sneeze or cough or we're around each other. Also, high-risk people, whether it be seniors, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but you have to understand, this is absolute truth. High-risk people, seniors, if you're wearing a mask and you believe that the mask protects you, then nobody else should have to wear one. If you're wearing a mask, you're protected. The problem is you're not protected. The mask doesn't help you. And again, it creates a false sense of security. If people touch their masks, which contaminates their mask, they don't wash their masks properly, they wear their masks and take them off and put them on, and it's all those masks are not even designed to do what we are asking them to do. And so again, if you're a high-risk person, you have an underlying health condition, then you should take the necessary precautions to keep yourself safe. Liberty demands a personal responsibility not a compulsion on others to interfere with their rights. The problem is also that I see government compulsion is unconstitutional. It's contrary to our rights. But I also see that Americans are good people and that we respect the rights of each other and we respect each other and the needs of each other. So people are voluntarily keeping the social distancing. People are voluntarily engaging in greater hygiene practices. Now, some people won't wear masks because they're just simply not effective. Other people can't wear masks. There are many underlying health conditions that make it impossible for people to wear masks. And again, there are credible studies that say wearing a mask actually can increase your chances of getting sick, especially with the homemade masks and that sort of thing. The second question, I only have two questions actually. What's happening with the Equal Rights Amendment? And also, what about Trump's executive order on the 501c3s impacting our churches and free speech? Well, remember that Trump's executive order only deals with federal agencies. It doesn't have anything to do with local government. Federal executive orders only govern executive agencies. They don't reach outside of executive agencies. And executive orders that reach outside of executive agencies are unconstitutional. So Donald Trump's executive order on freedom of religion prevents executive agencies from infringing upon the rights of churches. And I can tell you that that has changed a lot of things in the way executive agencies operate their rules and regulations already. The problem is when Donald Trump is no longer president, then that executive order can be removed and the old executive orders can be put in place and the old infringements also restored. The Equal Rights Amendment is not going to go anywhere because of the rules on amending the Constitution through Article 5. The Equal Rights Amendment has not complied with the rules according to amending the Constitution of Article 5. So that's not going to happen unless they can comply with those rules. And then finally, what I'd like to do is remind everybody to go ahead and ask your questions as you have them. But I wanted to also talk one last thing, because I heard Jan mention this in the conversation's opening. I want to talk to you about HR 6666 and what this bill actually does. This bill does not create any mechanism for contact tracing. It doesn't create any laws on contact tracing. It doesn't create any platform for contact tracing. It doesn't create any organizations for contact tracing, nor any mechanisms for contact tracing. So this bill does not establish federal agencies or federal procedures to interfere with the rights or the liberties of the people. HR 6666 is an appropriations bill. And the only thing that HR 6666 does is it authorizes the appropriations of $100 million for the fiscal year of 2020 to be distributed to eligible entities for conducting contact tracing. So once again, 6666 does not establish the mechanisms or the rules or regulations for contact tracing. It merely provides the funding for schools and nonprofit organizations and healthcare facilities to engage in the contact tracing platforms and structure that will be established by your state and local governments. And the reason that it's important for us to understand that HR 6666 is not the bill that creates the contact tracing mechanism and that it just simply applies the funding is because we can't be distracted by HR 6666 and start bombarding our legislators about this, because it doesn't do what we're being told that it does. Where the battle is on contact tracing will be, again, like the COVID restrictions, at the state and local levels. Now, the alarming thing we're seeing is that these counties, I don't know if you saw the reports from Ventura County, California, about how they believe that they're going to authorize people to go into your home and take your family members out of your home without consent, your children out of your home without consent. And that is reduced to lower level surveillance and contact tracings that we've seen proposed at the Hillsborough County, Florida level, where they take your cell phone data, trace it to your house, and then somebody comes to your house and knocks on your door and says, okay, we believe you've been in contact with someone that has been subject, that has tested positive, so now we're going to mandate that you be tested and mandate that you be quarantined. The Hillsborough County Emergency Planning Group, Policy Group also said that they were going to be using drones with infrared sensors to determine where large crowds of people will be meeting based on heat sensing technology, and then they were going to send people out to investigate those groups. Now, Vice Mayor Ross on the Hillsborough County Emergency Planning Group brought up a very great point about this technology being used is not just simply very big brotherish, it is very unconstitutional. And the use of infrared technology by the government to see into a private home or business has been deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court when the government uses it for peeping purposes. Not only that, the use of our cell phone location data and other cell phone data without a warrant has also been deemed unconstitutional by the Supreme Court when used by the government to trace where people go and where they are and who they've been. Now, the problem is that private companies can purchase that data from your cell phone companies. But for the county and the state to use them, the Supreme Court has said that that is unconstitutional, even if it comes from a third party that has purchased that from the cell phone companies. So the promoted means of contact tracing have been found already unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. And that's why we have to be diligent and vigilant at watching our state and local governments to ensure that these contact tracings mechanisms are not employed. Because number one, you're going to see lawsuits because of these mechanisms of contact tracing. Number two, the precedent indicates that your county or your state will lose these lawsuits, which means you, the taxpayers, will be forced to pay for the county or the state or the city of doing something that has already been deemed unconstitutional. And even so, we should not be supporting these kinds of things because they are violative of our rights. Now, I got another question here. It says, I get that we're being bombarded by all kinds of violations happening. What are you suggesting that we do? Well, I can tell you what I've seen successful throughout Florida, successful in Hillsborough County, where I currently reside, and all across the country. Now, our founders established that the greater concentrations of power will be at the state and local level and not the federal level. And that was specifically because we have greater control over our state and local governments than we do our federal governments. You have to admit that you have more control over your governor than you do the president of the United States. You have more control over your sheriff than you do the attorney general of the United States. And that's why government is more powerful, or let me put it this way, has access to more power than at the local level than it does at the federal level, because the people have more ability to limit power at the local level than they do the federal level. So what we did in Hillsborough County was we created email and phone call campaigns, little scripts that we distributed throughout the county to help people have the knowledge and the confidence to send emails and to send make phone calls to every member on the emergency planning group and to every member of the county. We even did it at the state level by sending emails and making phone calls to the governor. And what happened was 3 days after the pastor in Hillsborough County was arrested, the governor stepped up forward. Now, I'm not going to say that it was our email and phone campaign that forced him to do that, but I'm also going to tell you that you cannot deny that the thousands of phone calls and thousands of emails on this issue had an impact on him. But I will tell you, at the Hillsborough County level, we engaged in the same kind of email phone campaign, and it did influence our emergency planning group to withdraw the Hillsborough County order and go simply with the governor's recommendations. The Hillsborough County order was more restrictive on our private businesses, more restrictive on our parks and beaches, and more restrictive on our ability to travel and engage in everyday activities. So because of our email and because of our phone campaign, we convinced and influenced our emergency planning group to change their minds. We saw them change their minds because of our contact, and they actually withdrew entirely the Hillsborough County state safer at home order and decided to go simply with the governor's recommendations. And so that's the kind of power that we have. I actually published on my website, I published on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter all of the scripts that we used so far. I'll go ahead and share this screen with you so you can see. This portion right here, this email phone strategy for ending stay-at-home orders, is the scripts that we used, and you can use and modify them for your county. You can use and modify them to help you. We're also engaging in an email phone campaign to stop the unconstitutional contact tracing mechanisms that the emergency planning group revealed in their meeting last Thursday. And so I'm going to be publishing those as well, and you can use those for your own county. You will have to modify them because obviously everything is out for us is for Hillsborough County, but you can modify those for your own county, for your own city, for your own emergency planning group. And so that's how a constitutional republic works. Voting is not how you control government. Voting is the responsibility of every person who lives in a constitutional republic. It's what you do every other day, your active, vigilant engagement on local and state government that controls government. I want to share one last thing with you because Jan had talked about the sheriff, and this is the solution aspect also of what we're doing. What is the most powerful thing you can have when overcoming unconstitutional violations of your rights at the state and local and even at the federal level? The most powerful thing you have is a constitutional sheriff. Now, we don't have one of those in Hillsborough County. Chad Chronister is our sheriff. And unfortunately, even though he's a Republican, he is for gun control. He is in favor of red flag laws, which unconstitutionally take our rights. And he's actually the sheriff that arrested the pastor for having church. So we don't have a constitutional sheriff in Hillsborough County, Florida yet. But people are now on notice what a constitutional sheriff is supposed to look like, and that we don't have one. So that may change in the next election this November. So I want to share with you one last thing. a letter written, an open letter written by a sheriff in New Mexico. That is the best explanation I can tell you of a constitutional sheriff's duty to stand against these orders. He not only tells you why he has to stand against these orders, but he tells you the authority that the sheriff has. So let me go ahead and share this with you so we can read through it together. Now, this is Sheriff Mike Harrington. He is the sheriff of Chavez County, New Mexico. And he says, since before the birth of America, the duty of the sheriff has been to secure the rights of the people. This is evidenced by the sheriff's oath of office as they promise to the people to support the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of New Mexico and defend them, these rights of the people, against all enemies whatsoever. Now, our sheriff takes, all our sheriffs in the state of Florida take a similar oath of office to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Florida. And we also have seen that the Constitution of the state of Florida also embodies the same Bill of Rights as our U.S. Constitution, and we're going to see as the New Mexico Constitution. He says, the New Mexico Bill of Rights enshrines to every citizen of New Mexico the right that all persons are born equally free and have certain natural, inherent, and inalienable rights, among which are the rights of enjoying and defending life and liberty, of acquiring, possessing, and protecting property, and of seeking and obtaining safety and happiness, that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, and private property shall not be taken or damaged for public use without just compensation. Every business in Chavez County is essential when the people are dependent upon that income to provide for themselves and their families. It is not the job of a government to provide income to the people of and New Mexico was built upon the principle of private property ownership, hard work, and self-reliance. To say otherwise is simply ridiculous. As a constitutional officer, it's my duty and obligation to defend the rights of the people against every and all infringements. The New Mexico Constitution and the Florida Constitution establishes a strict separation of powers to ensure the security of the rights of the people, and that the powers of the government of this state are divided into three distinct departments: the legislative, executive, and judicial, and no person or collection of persons charged with the exercise of powers properly belonging to one of these departments shall exercise any powers properly belonging to either of the others. Furthermore, the New Mexico Constitution delegates to the legislative branch alone full legislative power for the governor to issue orders with the expectation that they be enforced upon the people is in direct conflict with the Constitution of the state of New Mexico and the most violent defiance of the essential principle of separation of powers. As a constitutional officer, it's my duty and obligation to defend the Constitution of the state of New Mexico against all violations and abuses of power. The sheriff, and this is a very, very important thing for us to understand, the sheriff is not a hireling of the state. We do not work for the governor or the county, and we are not beholden to any one person for a paycheck. We are direct constitutional representatives of the people. We work for the people, and therefore are the highest law enforcement authority in our county. All other law enforcement in the state is subject to the authority of the sheriff within their county. That authority demands the highest respect for the Constitution and the rights of the people, to which I intend to defend. The question here today is whether we overturn 244 years of history and duty of the sheriff for a new and radical ideology that replaces the duty of the sheriff to protect the rights of the people in the Constitution of New Mexico with an unconstitutional and unchecked power exercised by a governor that looks more like a monarch than a servant of the people. I will not stand idly by and watch the lives, liberties, and rights of the people of Chavez County, New Mexico, violated by unconstitutional and unjust pretended authorities. You will never find a clearer explanation and a clearer authority with the understanding of who the sheriff is and what his authority is. Your sheriff ranks the governor, the president, the state police, the county within your county's jurisdiction. Because he is not a hireling, he has taken an oath to protect and defend your rights. And so that would conclude the solutions part of it. I have one last question on the Equal Rights Amendment. How has the Equal Rights Amendment not complied with the rules? Surely the Democrats know how to write legislation or have their own lawyers to do so. Well, the Congress has said that you have a 7-year deadline to petition for an amendment to the Constitution, which means you must have 3/4 of the states to ratify the petition to submit the amendment for vote to the Constitution, right? So what has to happen is the states have to petition for a convention on the ratification of an amendment, and then the amendment must be voted on by the states, and you must have 3/4 of the states approve the amendment. The rules of the House and the Senate have been for several decades now that you have a 7-year deadline to produce the appropriate resolutions at the state level. And it's taken them more than 7 years to compile the 3/4 of the state's petition to amend the Constitution. And the rule was established as a 7-year deadline so that you couldn't start off in 1913 and then say, okay, here we are in 1986. We finally got 3/4 of the states, when the people who supported the amendment in 1913 are no longer living and would not be a proper reflection of the people. So the 7-year deadline was created so that the amendment process would maintain its integrity as a reflection of the people and not just carry on forever and ever. And so even Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who would be a liberal Supreme Court justice, has said that the Equal Rights Amendment fails the 7-year deadline, and that's the reason why it's failed. And that's why the Equal Rights Amendment will not be taken up as an amendment to the Constitution. And so if there are no other questions, then I will turn the podium over. And yes, sir.
KrisAnne, can you hear me?
I can hear you very well.
I'm the elections director for the Villagers for Trump, and I'm supposed to close out the show. But
Okay.
I have 2 things to share with you.
All right.
Number one, I have a friend whose mother, 83 years old, grabbed her chest, fell to the floor. They called EMS, and they said she died of, or she had a heart attack. They tried to revive her, and they couldn't. He got the death certificate, and it said she died of the virus. He tried to get it changed, but they said we can't. There's been reports that hospitals get more money treating people that had died from the virus, and that's why everything that happens now, people are dying from the virus. The second thing I want to share is I've been doing some research on this, and that 70% of the virus that enters your body goes through your nostrils.
Mm-hmm.
It goes in there, it festers, and then it becomes. If you use saline spray, either the pressurized one or the other, you wash it out if you go outside or you're around people, and also use an antiseptic mouthwash, because if it enters your mouth, it's a lot more protective than it is the face mask. I have to agree with that.
I will support that. I don't know if Jan told you, I don't remember the introduction, but my undergraduate degree is in biochemistry. So I understand the biological nature of a virus. And my family uses the over-counter hydrogen peroxide, which is the only thing known that actually will kill every single virus. And so what we do when we, before we go to bed at night, when we get up in the morning, is we swab the inside of our nose with the hydrogen peroxide, and we gargle with the peroxide as well. And that will kill any virus. Also, just to give you a little, maybe what one of my professors used to say, a little bonus for your educational dollar. A virus is not a living organism, which is why antibiotics don't kill viruses. A virus is a protein strand that is surrounded by fat molecules. The best the best way to kill a virus is to be in the sunlight, because the heat of the sun melts the fat away from the virus, and the virus cannot survive unprotected by its fatty layer. And that's why the whole idea of closing the beaches because of COVID was, again, just an arbitrary and capricious, unconstitutional application of law that was not based in science either.
KrisAnne, this is Jan. I concur. I am a clinician myself, and I work with a group of physicians across the country. And you're very correct. I also thank you for talking about the face masks, because really, if it's designed to protect somebody who's at risk. There is no science here. There's no science to the 6-foot rule. These are arbitrary and capricious, as you pointed out, and it's really controlling the population. And we would have to consider why. Why are they doing that? I think that that's very interesting.
And could I mention something really quick?
Sure.
We're actually engaging in public practices that increase our risk.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been to the grocery stores or to the stores now. They have these big plexiglass things in front of the counters. Those things actually increase they may protect the person behind the counter working the register, but they increase your risk, because every person that comes to that thing is breathing on that. And we have no idea how long that virus will stay living on that plastic. And then every time you go up to that plastic, which you're forced to go up on it to use the keypads, you're sucking in that stuff. So because we're operating out of irrational fear, we're not basing anything that we're doing on actual science. It's like I said before, the wearing of the masks in the making of these restrictions are giving us a false sense of confidence that are actually more dangerous to us than not having these established irrational protections to begin with.
I agree. And there are plenty of physicians who are speaking out right now about this. Unfortunately, they're not on the nightly news. And we have people like Dr. Tom Inglis from Johns Hopkins University, who helped lead the Event 201 simulation of a pandemic back in, I think it was October of 2019, prior to the release of this virus. It's also coincidental. He was talking to Chris Wallace on Sunday and said, oh no, we need to keep the lockdown going. And of course, there's no basis to that. But if you look at his background, you'll know that he's in charge of the Bloomberg Public Health at Johns Hopkins, and he's tied to the Gates Foundation. And so it's all about the vaccine. So KrisAnne, I mean, this has been extremely eye-opening. I am glad you brought up about the emergency planning boards. I don't think that was something I was aware of, and most people were not. We need to look into that. That is a non-elected group. My last question to you is, where are they getting their information to determine what rules and regulations they apply to us? Is that coming from the CDC? Is it coming from the State Department of Health? Where is it coming from?
Well, it's interesting that you ask, Jan, because if you go to the NIH, you go to the CDC, there are doctors who are publishing articles that conflict with the mainstream narrative, the fear-breeding narrative that we're getting about, we have to mandate masks. Like I said, there's an NIH doctor who published an entire study about how masks don't keep you safe. They actually are riskier than not having a mask at all. And that's published on the NIH. So when you ask who's influencing, I would say what they're doing is they're going to the CDC and they're going to the NIH, but they're cherry picking which side to get. And Stanley actually hit the nail on the head when he explained what's happening. Our groups are cherry picking the fear-mongering narratives because they get money as long as they can maintain a state of emergency, and they get money for people who are going to run out and take the tests, and they get more money for people who who will be led by the nose of this fear. And so it's all about getting money. I mean, we saw the greatest evidence of this when we were fighting the Hillsborough County Emergency Planning Group over. They were trying to, first they imposed a curfew and we started the campaign. We hit them hard on that campaign. The very next meeting, they couldn't remove the curfew quick enough. Then they tried to mandate masks, and we hit them with the campaign, and they decide. Then the people who were yes for the masks were now no for the masks, right? And so when we finally convinced them to withdraw the Hillsborough County order and simply go with the governor's recommendations, one of the most telling pieces of testimony that came from the board, from the group itself, was how, this was the question, if we remove the emergency planning group's safer at home order, how do we keep the funding? So when they figured out, and the county attorney explained, that as long as there's a state of emergency order, you can keep the funding, you don't have to have a separate county order, then all of a sudden, everybody who was a no, with the exception of the mayor of Tampa, who has been a complete tyrant through this whole thing. She wanted people locked up if they stepped out of their house. She's actually the one that had Tom Brady removed from a park for working out by himself. I mean, seriously, Tom Brady comes to help out the Tampa Bay Bucks, and she and her parks and recreation people remove him from the park, and he's working out by himself because she shut down the parks contrary to the governor's order. And so what these board members found out when they found out they could keep the funding, all of a sudden all their no's became yes, because now they could keep the money and keep the people from riding their backs through these email and phone campaigns at the same time.
Unbelievable. Well, this has been incredible. We need to definitely get smarter about our Constitution and what we need to do. So once again, they can get information from libertyfirstuniversity.com, right? And they
libertyfirstuniversity.com.
Right. And then going to KrisAnneHall.com, right?
Yes, that's where you can get our email and phone scripts, so you can start your own local campaign. We'll be publishing what we're doing this week in Hillsborough County on the contact tracing violations of our rights as well. So that'll be up there by the end of the day.
This has been fantastic, KrisAnne. Thank you. God bless you. Well, how do you find time to do all this? Oh my gosh, you have more energy, and I know you're on Twitter in the middle of the night. I can't believe it.
I don't sleep much, and my husband will tell you I don't sit still well.
I
am in desperate need of a few days off, because I haven't had any time off since this COVID thing happened, because I'm not just working here in Florida. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I'm helping people all over the country. I'm actually, not a lot of people know this, I'm actually helping foreign countries as well. Been working with South Africa, been working with the UK, been working with Australia to help them understand what their constitutions say, the changes they need to make in their constitutions, and how they can bind together in a unity to guard their own rights.
Well, we will be putting you on our prayer list, and maybe you need to go to the beach.
Yeah. Oh, well, I was actually, that's fun. I made it a work assignment. I was on the beach Sunday night before it became a lawful activity. And then I was on the beach at 12:01 a.m. when it became a lawful activity. And the intent was to show how arbitrary and capricious laws work, that I'm standing on the beach at midnight and I'm breaking the law. And at 12:01 midnight, I'm standing in the same place doing the exact same thing. And now I'm not breaking the law.
Did you put that on Twitter?
Yeah.
Okay.
KrisAnne, this is Stan again. I'd really like to thank you, and I will be sharing your website with people. I'm supposed to close the show out. I just wanted to make a few comments. And one of them is I'm doing some studies because, again, being the elections director, I'm trying to find different ways. We need to get people out to vote. We need Republicans. We need Christians. Because if we sit back and say Trump has won, it'll be the same thing as Hillary thought in 2016. Mm-hmm. But I just wanted to share with everybody that what's coming from China, besides the great gift of the virus that they sent us, the food that they're sending us and the medications. I was taking a Crestor medication for 20 years, and they changed it, and I went to the doctor, and my cholesterol spiked. So now we're investigating to see if that medicine is truly Crestor or not. But one of the amazing ones was I started doing research into food, tuna fish. I can't find a can of tuna fish that's not made in the Pacific coast except one. All the rest of them, what they're doing is China's sending it to Taiwan. Taiwan is stamping the bottom of the can made in Taiwan and sending it to the United States so that China doesn't have to pay the tariff. So what I'm saying is be careful and start doing investigations on the food that you're eating because it's coming from China.
I would mention to you, Stan, not to interrupt, but tea as well. A good majority of our tea, even though it may be packaged and distributed through even American companies, comes from China. Right. And China is simply a toxic waste dump. They are so irresponsible with their environment. And so just be conscientious about if you're a tea drinker, what kind of tea you take, because you don't know what kind of chemicals you're ingesting. And my husband is reminding me, and I apologize for saying one more thing. We are funded solely by donations and solely by the membership at libertyfirstuniversity.com. So anybody who appreciates what we do and finds value in what we do, we would just simply say, you know, every little bit helps, and we would be very excited to have somebody jump on board and tell us how to and help us, you know, keep our lights on all the time.
Okay, I'm told that I should cut this off, but I just got a question about what tuna, and I don't know if they were saying which one is the good and which is the bad. Bumblebee and Starkiss are made in China. There was only one that was made, and it said real tuna or something. But check all the other food. I'm serious. And what happens is when you look at it, it won't tell you where it's made. It'll say go online. It'll say processed or distributed in New York or California. So just be careful of that. But again, we have to close this out because we ran 15 minutes over, and I don't know if we're paying time to do this. But so thank you again very much for being here tonight. And again, we will try and share all this with everybody. And
Great.
I agree with what you're saying. We are going to start a campaign with our Villagers for Trump to raise money. We need advertising. We need billboards. We need everything to fight this because we only have 6 months left before the election.
That's right.
Okay. So thank you very much, everybody. Good night.